Gene Hackman is one of those rare performers whose presence on screen feels as natural as an old friend pulling up a chair beside you. Even though he rose to fame decades ago, most famously through his Oscar-winning role in The French Connection, his work still resonates with new generations discovering the best of new Hollywood cinema. There's a quiet force in his performances that goes beyond surface charm or theatrics. It's the warmth, the subtle wit, the raw honesty that always made him stand out. And what makes his story truly special is how he's spent these past years stepping away from Hollywood altogether, living a private life, and embracing a whole new creative path as a novelist. It's a journey that continues to fascinate those of us who watched him conquer the big screen, only to gracefully step aside and follow his own inner calling. In many ways, Gene Hackman's legacy seems even brighter now, reflecting the depth of a man who had the courage to walk away on his own terms. He was born in 1930 in San Bernardino, California, but grew up drifting from place to place, a childhood filled with challenges. By the time he was a teenager, he'd already seen enough of life's hard edges to be drawn to acting's promise of exploring different identities. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, just as the old studio system in Hollywood was starting to loosen its grip, Hackman found small parts here and there, often portraying tough guys, lawmen, or ordinary fellows whose complexity simmered beneath the surface. This was the dawn of new Hollywood, a moment of bold storytelling, deeply flawed heroes, and daring directors who craved raw, unpolished talent. Hackman fit in perfectly. He could be brash, understated, charming, or downright menacing, all in one scene. Audiences caught a glimpse of him in supporting roles throughout the 1960s, but the real breakthrough came in 1971 when he played Detective Popeye Doyle in The French Connection. With that single electrifying performance, Gene Hackman soared into the public's consciousness, claiming an Oscar and signaling that he was more than just another tough guy actor. In that intense era of the late 60s and 70s, New Hollywood was all about challenging norms. Directors like Francis Ford Coppola, William Friedkin, and Arthur Penn were forging stories that brought gritty realism and moral ambiguity to the forefront. Audiences craved authenticity, flawed heroes, violent truths, and emotional immediacy. Hackman was right at home in this landscape, delivering characters who seemed so fully realized that you forgot you were watching an actor. He had a knack for slipping under your skin, making you believe that the man on screen, whether a cop, a criminal, or an everyman, was a real person. Even as he rode the wave of this cinematic revolution, Hackman didn't let it define him completely. He kept seeking roles that sharpened his range, including some that at the time might have seemed offbeat. The French Connection remains a hallmark of his filmography, forever tied to his name. Yet perhaps equally remarkable was his understated performance in The Conversation, 1974, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. In that film, he played Harry Call, a haunted surveillance expert whose quiet paranoia spoke volumes about a society losing faith in its institutions. This was Hackman in top form. No big explosions or gunfights, just a man's face etched with guilt and anxiety, carrying the weight of secrets he wished he didn't know. Many film historians point to this role as one that cemented Hackman's reputation for soulful, layered acting. Though he didn't get the Oscar that time, plenty of admirers still say it's among his best work. Those who followed his career saw him as a perfect chameleon. One minute he was a heroic coach leading a small-town basketball team in Hoosiers, 1986. The next he was Lex Luthor, tormenting Superman, 1978, with cunning wit. He could be an unyielding Western lawman in Unforgiven, 1992, for which he took home another Academy Award, or a priest wrestling with moral dilemmas in a smaller production that might barely register in mainstream media. This was the Hackman gift, the seamless ability to inhabit characters' hearts, whether shining or dark, without losing authenticity. And unlike many other major stars, he seemed more interested in the project's integrity than in chasing the spotlight. Critics and directors alike praised him for a grounded approach to acting, and castmates often spoke of him as the real deal, someone who brought sincerity to even the most outlandish roles. Yet for all the attention he garnered through these high-profile roles, Hackman's career also included lesser-known ventures that revealed deeper shades of his personality. One example is Scarecrow, 1973, a road movie he co-starred in with Al Pacino. It didn't rake in huge box office numbers, but the film offered a surprisingly tender story of two vagabonds hoping to open a car wash. Hackman's portrayal of Max, a hot-tempered ex-con, is imbued with vulnerability. For longtime fans, there's real joy in watching Hackman and Pacino bounce off each other in scenes that blend humor, desperation, and unexpected warmth. Though Scarecrow never gained the fanfare of The French Connection, it remains a hidden gem in Hackman's portfolio, providing a glimpse of how his passion for authentic characters often led him to smaller, more personal projects. Another often overlooked chapter came in the early 1980s when Hackman collaborated on a drama set entirely in a remote mining town. The project, which was eventually released under the title All Night Long, underwent numerous production hurdles, including funding issues and creative disagreements, and ultimately opened to lukewarm reviews. Hackman's performance, however, stood out for its balance of comedic timing and emotional realism. Despite the film's failure to catch on with critics or audiences, Hackman's work in it demonstrated his willingness to step outside his comfort zone, exploring the messy intersections of family life, small-town economics, and personal ambition. It was a far cry from the big thrillers and dramas that usually drew viewers to the theaters. But for Hackman, the chance to explore the quieter corners of the human experience was always part of the appeal. One might think that a performer of his caliber, with 2 Oscars and decades of revered roles, would keep riding that Hollywood train indefinitely. Instead, in the early 2000s, Hackman made a decision that surprised many. He retired from acting entirely. He had done his fair share of big studio productions, some more successful than others, and ended his on-screen career with Welcome to Mooseport, 2004, a lighthearted comedy that left many fans puzzled. Why bow out after a relatively small comedic turn? According to a close friend, Hackman felt he had nothing left to prove. He'd found himself increasingly fatigued by the Hollywood grind, and more intrigued by the idea of living life at his own pace, free from the demands of film sets, interviews, and paparazzi cameras. Some who worked with him in his final years on set recall him occasionally grumbling about the lack of space for nuanced characters in modern blockbusters. "I don't know if there's a place for an old guy like me in these big action flicks," he reportedly joked at a wrap party. Yet no matter how drained he felt by the business, he never stopped caring about the craft. One young crew member remembered Hackman pulling him aside to compliment his work, saying, "You've got an eye for detail. Keep going." It was a small moment that the crew member never forgot, illustrating how Hackman, even in his later years, believed in uplifting others. After stepping away, Hackman retreated to a quiet life primarily in New Mexico. He took up writing full-time, something he'd dabbled in for years. Over the next decade, he would publish several novels, mostly historical fiction and thrillers co-written with a friend. Though none of these books became runaway bestsellers, They earned a respectable following, especially among those curious to see another side of the famed actor. Critics noted that Hackman's characters seemed grounded in emotional complexity, reflecting the same sense of realism he brought to his film performances. One longtime neighbor in Santa Fe recalls seeing him typing away in a cafe early most mornings. "He just looked so content," she said, "like a man who'd found his second calling." Still, the move away from Hollywood wasn't without its challenges. For the better part of 4 decades, Hackman's life revolved around film projects, award ceremonies, table reads, and location shoots. Like any major shift, transitioning to a quieter lifestyle brought introspection. Colleagues who remained in contact say he sometimes missed the camaraderie of a film set, the shared excitement of bringing a story to life. But he also relished not having to transform himself into public property at every premiere or press conference. Some of the emotional strain that came with fame began to melt away. Hackman found solace in long drives on back roads, solitary fishing trips, and time spent with family, a chance to make up for the years he'd sacrificed in pursuit of cinematic excellence. During those early retirement years, controversies swirled. A few tabloids attempted to paint him as a recluse, insisting he'd cut off old friends and become bitter. Others pointed out that Hackman simply valued his privacy and had grown weary of Hollywood's relentless spotlight. A debate also brewed among fans and critics. Was it a tragedy that this legendary actor would no longer grace the screen? Or should his decision be celebrated as an artist honoring his own mental well-being? Some scholars of the new Hollywood period noted that Hackman's departure signified the end of an era, a sign that the dynamic wave of 1970s icons had largely receded from mainstream filmmaking. Others praised him for leaving the stage gracefully, rather than hanging on for roles that didn't inspire him. There was also a rumor that a major director approached him around 2008, with a part crafted specifically for Hackman's seasoned presence, something akin to a wise, elderly mentor figure. The story goes that Hackman politely declined, stating he'd already said his goodbyes to that world. This stirred up lively chatter online, with some fans lamenting the lost opportunity to see him in one final dramatic showdown. Others admired his commitment to personal happiness. "At a certain point, you have to do what's right for you," a former co-star said in an interview. "If anyone deserves that peace, it's Gene." And with that, the conversation mostly settled, leaving Hackman free to continue quietly penning novels and enjoying a life far from paparazzi lenses. Yet, even with his Hollywood chapter closed, his legacy refused to fade. Film buffs and younger audiences discover the conversation Hoosiers and Bonnie and Clyde every year, marveling at the authenticity he delivered in roles both big and small. Directors speak of Hackman with reverence, often placing him in the same breath as Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and Dustin Hoffman, actors who reshaped how we view film performance. But in many ways, Gene Hackman stands apart because of that unassuming way he embodied the roles he played. You almost never see the wheels turning. There's no showy method, no self-conscious attempt at greatness, just a man who disappears into character. Today, with so many star-driven vehicles focusing on brand identities or franchises, that kind of effortless realism feels like a relic from a different time. Many fans, especially older viewers, sense a personal bond with Hackman's journey. His story resonates with anyone who's worked tirelessly at a craft, achieved success, and then faced the question, where do I go from here? In interviews during the later part of his career, Hackman sometimes hinted at self-doubt and the emotional cost of inhabiting so many dramatic lives. Acting, he once told a journalist, is a beautiful challenge, but it can wear you down if you're not careful. knowing he recognized that toll and chose to guard his well-being in his final years, has comforted fans who see parallels in their own lives. Retirements from long-held jobs, big moves away from the city, or the search for a new form of creativity in later life. Curiously, though, stepping away from the camera didn't mean stepping away from public engagement entirely. Over the years, Hackman has made sporadic appearances for special tributes or documentaries about cinema history. He's contributed the occasional interview snippet, often recorded quietly in his home, to discuss a beloved director or to reflect on the making of a landmark film like The French Connection. In these rare interviews, he seems at peace, still articulate, sharing humorous behind-the-scenes details as though he's talking to an old friend. He's declined repeated invitations to star in cameo roles or to show up as a special guest at major Hollywood events. But those who've spoken with him confirm that he remains proud of his work, cherishing the memories of collaborations with people he respected and admired. Now, it's not as if his later years were entirely free of hardship. Aging brings its own set of challenges, from health concerns to the sorrow of watching longtime friends pass away. In 2012, rumors circulated that Hackman had suffered a minor health scare. Some said a heart issue. Others claimed he'd had a serious bicycle accident while riding near his home. He never made a public fuss about any of it, apparently preferring to recover in private. A former neighbor mentioned that he saw Hackman walking with a noticeable limp for a while, but the actor never complained. This stoic grace, friends say, is entirely in line with Hackman's character. He's always been one to endure quietly, never seeking sympathy or spectacle. For a brief spell around 2015, whispers arose that maybe he was working on a screenplay, or that he might eventually come out of retirement to direct or produce a small indie project. Nothing ever came of it, and Hackman himself didn't comment. Public debates flared up again on social media and film forums. Did he owe it to cinema to come back one last time? Was he truly content living the life of a novelist, far from the buzz of film sets? The discussions often reflected more about fans longing to see him than about Hackman's personal desires. In the end, he remained silent on the matter, letting the rumor mill spin. If there was any real chance of returning to Hollywood, he either changed his mind or decided it wasn't worth the emotional toll. And why should he? He'd already given so much on screen. To fully grasp why Gene Hackman's life and legacy still matter, especially for older viewers, you have to understand that he represents a bridge between eras. He's one of those performers who started in a time when Hollywood was reinventing itself, rebelling against glossy perfection in favor of gritty realism, and then carried that fearless spirit through the decades. Many of those who fell in love with film during the 1970s see Hackman as a symbol of their own youthful awakening to the power of cinema. Seeing him step away on his own terms, embracing a calmer existence, reminds us that it's possible to honor one's roots and passions while allowing our priorities to shift later in life. It's a testament to the resilience of an artist who can adapt and find new ways to express himself, even after stepping off the most prominent stage. Hackman's experiences in retirement also serve as a reflection on the price of fame. For anyone who's weathered the ups and downs of a high-pressure career, his story offers solace. There's no shame in concluding a chapter when it feels complete. He embraced his second act not as a fallback plan, but as a genuine desire to explore a different form of storytelling. By all accounts, he's found satisfaction in weaving fictional worlds through his novels, savoring the creativity without the constant spotlight. Friends say he remains intellectually curious, often researching historical events or lesser-known cornerstones of American life to fuel his writing. This blend of curiosity and discipline mirrors the same qualities that made him an extraordinary actor. Of course, not everyone agrees on how we should view his departure. Some critics lament the roles we never got to see him play, arguing he could have continued to elevate cinema. Yet others admire him for staying true to himself. There's also a faction of Hollywood insiders who argue that older actors, particularly those as talented as Hackman, still have much to offer in terms of mentorship, cameo appearances, or guiding younger performers. But Hackman never seemed particularly interested in the mentor spotlight. He shared advice when asked or when he saw a genuine spark in someone, but he wasn't the type to hold master classes or appear on talk shows dispensing wisdom. In that sense, he remains a bit of an enigma, an intensely private figure who influenced countless actors and filmmakers simply by the example he set on set. This clash of viewpoints has generated some healthy debates, especially among film scholars. Was Hackman's retreat an abdication of cinematic responsibility? Or was it a well-deserved rest for an artist who gave us more than enough iconic performances? Depending on your perspective, it can be seen as both. What's undeniable is the space he's left in the industry, a void for a certain breed of compelling, no-nonsense performer who could command the screen with just a weary glance or a single well-timed line of dialogue. The longer he stays away, the more his status as a living legend grows. Younger directors occasionally name him as a dream collaborator. Movie buffs organize retrospectives, screening his lesser-seen gems alongside the classics, hoping to spotlight the breadth of his talent. His fans continue to share stories online about the first time they saw him, maybe in a small cinema back in 1971, or on a VHS tape borrowed from a friend in the mid-1880s. For many, Hackman's work is woven into the fabric of their personal history, a reminder of eras that have come and gone. This emotional resonance remains a key reason people still talk about him. When you step back to reflect, you see how powerfully Hackman's life lessons apply to anyone striving to leave a mark in their chosen field. First, there's the unwavering pursuit of authenticity. It's something he carried throughout his career, from playing a ruthless villain to a heartbroken father, always grounding even the broadest roles in a believable humanity. Second, there's his insistence on knowing when to walk away, a decision that must have been tough, especially for someone used to the applause and accolades. But he did it with grace, showing all of us that letting go can be an act of courage. Then there's his ability to reinvent himself as an author in his later years. Many older viewers understand how intimidating it can be to start a new chapter in life, especially when society is busy praising the achievements you've already accomplished. Hackman's willingness to shift focus, to become a learner again, stands as an encouraging sign that it's never too late to try something new. And for those of us watching from afar, hearing about his calm daily routines, his writing sessions, and his occasional soft chuckle in an interview, it's a gentle reminder that fulfillment can take many forms. From the vantage point of film history, he'll always be a central figure in New Hollywood, rubbing shoulders with the likes of Robert Duvall and Dustin Hoffman, actors who broke down barriers and redefined movie stardom with honest, unvarnished performances. Yet Hackman's significance doesn't end with that group. His later adventures, stepping outside the limelight, demonstrate that an artist can remain vital and reflective even as he or she leaves the frantic pace of fame behind. He showed that you don't have to cling to your old identity forever. You can set it aside, preserve the best parts of it, and still find new ways to grow. That in itself is an inspiring tale for anyone who's ever wrestled with the notion of retirement, second acts, or finding fresh passions after a lifetime of work. Toward the end of the 2010s, Hackman began granting fewer and fewer interviews. On rare occasions, he might offer a brief email response to a journalist or appear via voice recording in a documentary about a dear friend who had passed away. Each time, he sounded healthy, grounded, and genuinely unburdened by the trappings of celebrity. Whenever asked if he missed acting, he offered some variation of the same answer. He had enjoyed it immensely, but he was content with the memories and felt no urge to return. After all, he reasoned, life is short, and there are so many other things worth doing while you still can. There's something profoundly moving in that acceptance. We live in a world that often measures a person's worth by how long they can stay on top. Hackman's exit challenges that narrative, reminding us that sometimes the truest success is knowing when you've given enough. Even the controversies, those fleeting tabloids calling him a recluse or fans demanding one last performance, never seemed to ruffle him. He possessed an inner tranquility about his choices, the sort that can only come from a man who knows he's done more than his share to enrich the culture. As we look back on his life story, from a scrappy kid discovering his love of acting to a two-time Oscar winner revered by peers, then to a quietly productive novelist living on his own terms, we're left with an emotional portrait of genuine artistry. Hackman's later years remind us that our legacies aren't built solely on high points. They're woven through the quiet afterglow, too. The measure of a career, after all, isn't merely found in the trophies or the box office receipts, but in the lasting impact on audiences and collaborators, and in the sense of fulfillment the artist carries into the twilight of his life. For viewers of a certain generation, many of whom watched Hackman's star rise and followed him through decades of cinema, there's a bittersweet feeling in knowing he's finished with acting. But there's also something beautiful about recognizing how comfortable he is with where his journey led him. It's a testament to a life lived fully and honestly, embodying characters that spoke to our deepest fears and hopes, then stepping away to explore a quieter existence that allowed him to remain curious and creative. And that, perhaps, is the greatest lesson older viewers can take to heart. Gene Hackman's story shows us that our identities can evolve in unexpected ways, and that sometimes the bravest decision is the one where we honor our changing passions. Success doesn't have to mean grinding away in the same arena for all our days. For Hackman, the second act turned out to be about words on a page, not lines delivered on a set. It brought him a sense of peace that resonates far beyond the confines of Hollywood. And if you ask folks who love film history, particularly those who cherish the new Hollywood era, they'll tell you that Gene Hackman is far from gone. He's present in every intense stare on the big screen when a character is morally cornered. He's in every crisp line delivered with quiet restraint. He's in the recollections of directors who still speak about him with awe. And he's on our bookshelves too, wrapped in stories he chose to tell once he laid down the burdens of stardom. His voice echoes in all these places, a steady, humble reminder that an extraordinary life need not stay in the spotlight to remain significant. It's rare in this day and age to witness such a graceful departure from a realm that bestows both fame and pressure in equal measure. Hackman gave what he could, then allowed himself the freedom to withdraw, carrying a lifetime of experiences into the gentler realm of personal reflection. For those of us watching from the outside, his journey offers a certain serenity, a hope that we, too, can adapt to life's turning points without fear, trusting that the impact of our past efforts will stand on its own. As the years roll on, and we find ourselves revisiting the French Connection or Hoosiers, we can't help but be reminded of that same message. Do your best, then know when it's time to let go. That's why Gene Hackman's story lingers so deeply. It's not just about the astonishing performances he delivered or the accolades he earned or even the beloved characters he brought to life. It's also about a man who decided long after he'd established himself as one of the finest actors in American cinema that he had other mountains to climb, other interests to pursue. And in choosing that path, he left behind a legacy that feels both complete and somehow still growing, even in absence. We're left with gratitude, admiration, and perhaps a nudge of courage for our own journeys, knowing that reinvention is always possible at any age. As we wrap up these reflections, let's hold on to the essence of Hackman's approach, that quiet, determined spirit which never needed to shout for attention, and that willingness to embrace life's next stage with grace. Whether you discovered him first as Popeye Doyle, Lex Luthor, or an aging cowboy in a dusty western, his work likely left a mark on you. And if you've followed his life into these quieter, more solitary years, you've seen an artist at peace with himself, a notion that rings especially poignant for those of us navigating our own later chapters. May his story remind us that the measure of a well-lived life is not just in the eyes of the public, but also in the contentment found in one's own heart. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.